Every man, woman, and child, every human being is on a quest for this one thing. Everyone craves it. In everything that they do in life, they are searching for it. They are pressed from within to find this one thing. It's called dominion. I am here to help you win, to point you in the direction so that you can obtain dominion. My job is to help you to win. This is the Transparency to Power podcast. Okay, we have some exciting information, some things that I think people should be asking more questions, and they're not. But welcome to the podcast. This is Transparency to Power. Transparency to Power podcast. If you haven't told your friends, family about this podcast, people you work with, coworkers, whoever you come in contact with, you should go ahead and do that now. Hit the subscribe button if you have not subscribed to the channel, and then like it. Make sure you like it. That helps us out a lot. And share it with someone. Please share this information with someone. Have some podcasts that are going to be strong reinforcement for some things that you have thought of, maybe believe, maybe you've had conversation about, but then there are going to be some podcasts that are going to share some things that may be new for you. Today, this may be one of those things. I've talked to many people about this, some of the things that we're going to be sharing. And surprisingly, when I talk to people about it, it's been some time now that I've become aware of this information. And the more that I see it not being talked about, what it does, it makes me ask questions as far as why. You know, when someone, they go and they slip some information to someone, and you're trying to figure out, well, why would they, you know, there's another motive. That what are they trying to accomplish by sharing that information, by putting someone on blast, by what are they trying to accomplish? What's the underlying? Well, that's where I'm at now as far as with this information that I'm going to share with you. Again, welcome to the podcast. So I don't know if anyone's been watching as far as world news. The UN just passed a resolution. And with this resolution, they are calling the TransAtlantic Slave Trade the gravest criminal act against humanity. And I want to tell you, chattel slavery, it was horrific. It was a monstrosity of cruelty to human beings, separating them from their families and dehumanizing them. That I think that perhaps was the greatest tragedy, which is what chattel is. When you're talking about slavery, that is chattel. You're talking about a person, a human being, being reduced from being a human being and treated as property. And that's where the families were divided, and husbands and wives could not be legally married because they didn't want to give them a sense of ownership, making it difficult when they would try and split families up. And, you know, when you talk about the transatlantic slave trade and any slavery, but particularly the transatlantic, and the thing that I'm gonna bring up is it's not just about people being held in servitude. It's about also the brutality that took place in order to control people. And then when people were living out their low level dysfunctions as far as sinful behavior, the rape that happened, the brutality that happened, the beatings, the killings, those things that happened, the castrations, all these things, the dismemberment. And then to add that it was made illegal for slaves to be educated. Just to educate a slave was illegal because now we're giving people a sense of value. And when they have a sense of value, they may not think it's a good idea to be a slave any longer, even more so than before they were educated. So, these are some things that, yes, when we talk about chattel slavery, uh, this is something that everyone should agree with, right? That this is among the gravest crimes committed against humanity. I would agree with that, to say among the gravest that have been committed against humanity, absolutely. But why are these people that are putting pen to paper, or the people who are the authors of this resolution? This is where, again, I want you as the audience, after what I'm going to share with you, why are they only focused on the transatlantic slave trade? You see, again, as I mentioned, that there are some things that I share, and when I share them, people, they say, oh yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I've heard of that. And you know what? I thought about this, but okay, I'm hearing his perspective on it. But then there are some things that I share that perhaps you haven't heard of before, have no idea that it exists. And so as I said, I've now, for some time now, I've been aware of this history. And after being aware of this history, over time, I've been watching key people, key people that you would think that they would bring this up, and that they would talk about this, and that they would make this a part of their tour. You have people who tour the United States, people who go from the United States to other countries, and they are constantly talking about the transatlantic slave trade, and they are talking about the brutalities of it, and all the things that went along with it. And then, of course, the conversation of reparations. And let me add, this is not a video to talk about if reparations should happen or if they should not happen. That is not the narrative of this podcast. With that, you have people who, they make this has become a way of life, and a way to make a living, a way to make a living. People have capitalized off of this topic and have become very versed on this topic. People who have doctor on the front of their name, or reverend on the front of their name, minister on the front of their name, accomplished titles. So you would figure their sense of awareness is keen. They understand things on a level that the rest of us, we don't understand. But why aren't they talking about this? So I'm going to play a video for you. After this video, we're going to get back in. This is not going to be a long podcast, but we're going to get back in. And after you watch this video, see, this is something that I encourage people when I have an opportunity to stand in a podium and to address people who sit before me. First of all, the Bible does not say that it does not want us to think for ourselves. It speaks and says the opposite. Paul says in the book of Romans, let every man be persuaded in his own mind. In his own mind, meaning that God wants us all to be independent, critical thinkers, to all come to the conclusion independently that he's good, not following the cattle, not following the rest of the crowd, but each of us having an individual experience And out of that individual experience, coming to the same conclusion, because his word is truth. And if you come to a conclusion where you find truth, everybody's going to be on the same page. What God does not want is for us to have this sense of individualism, which is different than you just being an individual. Individualism is when you become shut off from the rest of the world and everything is your ideas, your interpretation. That's where the danger is. Perhaps that's what has gotten us where we are now, where you have people who are not critical thinkers, have a group of people, certain group of people who are on circuits who have been in this sphere of, or this realm of individualism. So they have isolated ways of viewing things, but they have affected the masses with it. And so after you watch this video, I want you to be a critical thinker while you watch it. I want you to hopefully come away with some questions. Come away with some questions. And as you come away with some questions, we have to really try and figure, what are they doing? And why aren't the people who are so-called representatives who are on circuits talking about the transatlantic slave trade, never highlighting this, what we're about to show you right now? Watch this video.
The world has heard 1,000 stories of the transatlantic slave trade, of how strange men with skin like milk rampaged the rich foliage of Africa's lands and took captive its inhabitants, of how families were torn apart and entire societies were decimated, of how millions were shackled, packed into ships like cargo, and carried across treacherous waters to a world where they would never again be free. Yet long before the first Europeans set foot on African soil, another trade had already been in motion, a trade that would last for over 1,000 years, from the 7th to 20th century, the Arab slave trade.
Okay, so there you have it. So the UN makes a resolution to declare the transatlantic slave trade as being the worst thing that has ever happened to the African continent and humanity, for that matter. Humanity, the gravest crime against humanity. So we're talking about a little over 200 years. If you want to put an exact number on it, there are a few numbers out there. You have a few people, 240, some odd 250. You have a few variations, but let's just say that you have roughly about 250 years that this happens. And then it was outlawed, of course, but it still was going on. So the laws were in place, but it wasn't being enforced. But in any case, where we are today, what it produced some horrible things. Even now, how the people who are descendants from that are viewed as less valuable. This happens in our courts, unfortunately. This happens in our law enforcement. This happens with creditors. And don't get me going on that. I've worked in an industry where I seen people get higher interest rates because of how they look and the assumption that was made about what they had up here because of how they look. And even though they qualified for lower interest rates, we've seen things like that, right? You had the housing crisis where this happened. These are realities. Yes, we need to talk about these things. We need to address them. We need to make sure that people are being treated fairly. We cannot put on rose-colored glasses and act like, oh, there's no more racism. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie from the pit of hell. I really think that there's going to be racism to some degree until Jesus comes and reigns on the earth. This is what I believe. But anyway, whole nother topic. But UN says that the transatlantic slave trade, but why is it now? Now go back to what I asked at the beginning of the video, that you have these influencers. Some of them are uh, they're on social media, some of them, but these are influencers that sit in rooms in front of people and fill rooms with people hanging on their every word and hanging on their insights in the spin that they put on. And my thing is, I'm asking the question, why has this not been at the forefront? Because if you're talking about a little over 200 years, right around 300 years, if you add Jim Crow, you talking about 400 years and all but that does not compare to over 1,000 years where the same exact thing, chattel slavery, the same exact thing, there is no difference. There's no difference except for the way that the people look who did it, the perpetrators. That's the only difference. But if you brutalize me for 300 years versus 13 plus 100 years, if I had to choose, if somebody said, "Hey, I'm gonna nail a nail in your hand in a different spot on your hand. I'm going to hit a knuckle, and then I'm going to hit fingertips, but I'm going to do it for 3 days." And then another person says, I'm going to do it for 13 years." I'll take the 3 days. I'll take, and not saying no, and because we're going to have people going to watch and listen to this, and because they are so ready to defend their position rather than to listen to what's being said. Someone's going to try and say, "I'm trying to defend transatlantic slavery." Absolutely not. It was horrendous. It is a crime against humanity, but there's one that's worse. As far as the trans-Saharan slave trade, which was chattel slavery, these people were taken and they were property. The African men in Northern Africa, so you take Northern Africa, across the continent, across the northern part of the continent, you have times when they would go in and they would grab men. You had times they go in and they would just get the women. And when they got the women, they would get them many times strictly for the purpose to be concubines. So where for the transatlantic, we had, yes, you had rape, you had all this kind of stuff going on. But as far as the Saharan, when they brought them over, when they went over and they were just going to get women, they were getting them for the purpose to be concubines specific. The men, when they would go get the men, they would castrate the men upon capture, because castration, for I think it was maybe religious purposes or something like that, for what they believed. We're talking about Arabs. It was not something that was deemed as acceptable. So they would castrate them when they captured them. And then they expected them to walk across the desert. And if you're not familiar with the Sahara Desert, it is the largest desert on Earth. So just so you can put that in your notes, it's the largest desert on Earth. People were captured from Africa and they were made to walk across this desert, and their captors rode on camels. So many of these men, they died. Either they bled out or they died from infection. And of course, reason why they would castrate them, because they didn't want these men coming back to where they were going to use them as slaves and becoming a potential problem with their women wanting to have sensual interaction with these slave men. So making men eunuchs was a part of being captured as a slave. And we're talking about, let me specify, we're talking about the Ottoman Empire. It confuses me. So I brought up these different influencers. So you have influencer, a speaker, and he brings out a lot of these things when we're talking about the transatlantic slave trade and the atrocities that have happened to the African diaspora. So there's a doctor Doctor. So we're not talking about people who should not know, who perhaps could not know, or it would just miss them. But Dr. Umar Johnson, you have Reverend Al Sharpton, you have Minister Louis Farrakhan, who happens to be, as far as faith system, affiliated with the faith system that was responsible and engaged, involved in this 1,300-year stretch of this atrocity, this crime against the continent of Africa. Whenever they would go to war, meaning the Muslim nations, they would go to war during this period of this Saharan slave trade. When they would go to war and it would be another Muslim country, well, it's not permissible for a Muslim to fight against a Muslim. They go into Africa, they capture, they get these men, and then they make them go to war. So as part of their duty being a slave is to go out and fight. And they will fight it out, and they will put the slaves out there to fight it out. And even if they converted to Islam, these slaves, they were not treated like the Arab Muslims. And this is factual. This is history. And you know, I listen and I listen and I listen, and I hear a lot of it's almost like the silence is excusing them. So maybe let's say they do know about this history, but you know what? We're not going to hold them because they're not our immediate brutalizers. They're not the ones that immediately abused us as a group of people. It's this is something that people need to talk about. There's plenty of information out there. Here's a book. This book, it's called Slavery in the Arab World. Its release date, the release date of this book is April of 1998. So for those of you that are watching this and you say, I've never heard of this, I never heard Mr. Louis Farrakhan talk about this. I never heard Reverend Al Sharpton talk about this. I've never heard Dr. Umar Johnson, and I'm speaking of the ones that are still alive and still with us. There are many others that are no longer with us that never spoke of this. Now, some of them, maybe they didn't know about it, but now let's bring this to the table. Let's talk about it. That book, Slavery in the Arab World, is by Murray Gordon. Murray Gordon, released in 1998. But there are many other writings out there. This is one that I just would recommend to you. So there's a big problem here that I see by the UN making this resolution to say we're going to deem this as the gravest crime against humanity, the transatlantic slave trade. I want you to just consider that you have a crime that's committed. You have someone that goes into the bank. They have a gun. They put on a mask. And then they rob the bank. They hurt a few people while they're robbing the bank. They get away with $3 million. And then you have the person who's driving the getaway car. Just as guilty, right? Because he's involved in the same crime, but driving the getaway car. Somehow, the person who was robbing the bank gets away, but they catch the person who's driving the getaway car. And they know that the person who robbed the bank got away. They know there was someone else, but they want to move this case forward. They want to really press hard on the driver, and they get the driver into the court. The driver made it possible for everything to happen and for the person that did the robbery to get away. Now, it's not, I know someone's going to say it's not apples to apples. Both of them robbed the bank. One took more and one took less. But if you try and take that to trial without having all of it, you try to say this is the worst thing that happened. Let's say it was both people robbing, one person got away with less, the other person they know they got away with $3 million. This person they got away with, they actually didn't have the majority, the other person had the bags, they were both inside. So now let's make the driver that. Let's make the driver that. They were both inside. They both had guns. They both shot somebody. The one guy who got away with the money shot more people. The guy they got is the one who did less, and they know that because they have cameras. They have the evidence. But they present that this is the worst thing ever. And what do you think the person that they caught, what do you think that person's attorney is going to argue? That person's attorney is going to argue that there should be a mistrial. And one of the factors that causes a mistrial is if you have something that it shows prejudice in your evidence. And so you have improper admission of testimony or evidence that unfairly influences the jury. So when you say, this is the worst, this is the worst, however you want to look at it. But I think that this is what's going to happen to the resolution that they put forth. And then ask the question, why are they not talking about the trans-Saharan? Why doesn't, in all these years, why haven't you had, if this was highlighted, would someone like a Minister Louis Farrakhan even be a Muslim? Because Muslims were brutalizing. Matter of fact, Christianity was in Africa before the Ottoman Empire came and conquered. And then because of that conquest, that's what opened the door when the transatlantic slave trade was about to begin, and you had missionaries they were reintroducing Jesus to Africa after what had happened because of the Ottoman Empire and Islam. So would these people if they were keen on this, would Muhammad Ali had changed his name? Would Malcolm X had changed his name? Would any of these people have the position that they have? And it just caused me, what is this love affair? What is this love affair culturally that's had? To me, it's somewhat like Stockholm Syndrome. These people have committed atrocities that lasted much longer. And, some people say it was much worse. Go out and look the information up for yourself. But some people say it was much worse. But yet, there's this love affair, and you say, why? Why are people so inviting and so open and not understanding that there's something wrong here? And one thing I want to say to the church that is definitely wrong, and you could go read in the 19th chapter in the book of Acts for yourself, and you'll end up around verse 28. And you'll see the Apostle Paul was not trying to make friends, the goddess of Diana, the priest of that, the people who were making the little statuettes, the idols, the images of that. Paul wasn't coming and say, hey, let's coexist. But the church today, we want to coexist with everyone instead of evangelizing to them about the one true risen Lord, the Lord Jesus Christ. And this is why this system, this political system having itself wrapped in religion, is spreading throughout the world. And you wonder, why isn't anyone calling this to the carpet? Well, there's going to come a day when it's going to continue to blow up. continue to see cities where they are marking their territory and bowing in the middle of the street. I wonder if they have permits to do that, stopping traffic and all those different things. But there's going to come a day when all of a sudden people are going to open up their eyes and they're going to be like, wow, wait a minute. All this stuff that we've been seeing, all these things historically that have been happening, it brings to mind in the scripture in the 14th chapter in the book of Isaiah, and starting with verse 16 and verse 16 and verse 17, a question is asked. They that see you shall narrowly look upon you and consider you, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of his prisoners? The trans-Saharan slave trade. I'm going to invite you to take a look into it, and then I'm going to invite you to a question. Why isn't anyone talking about this? And as far as for the issue of reparations, could that overlook create the mistrial for the pursuing of reparations for the transatlantic slave trade? Just a question, something that I hope you think about, because we want you to win. This is Transparency to Power podcast. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you. We hope that you took notes and that you enjoyed this podcast. Please click like, subscribe, and share. Transparency to Power